Hello, everyone. I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you who have joined us for this presentation. I firmly believe that every person has a unique story to tell. Today, we're not only going to share our stories, but also shed light on the lives of the first pioneers who settled in Pulaski County, Virginia. My aim is to inspire each one of you to write your own story because every story is significant and deserves to be not only heard, but to be passed down to the rising generation. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I am a family enterprise consultant and family historian who lives here at Belle-Hampton in Dublin, Virginia. The farm has been in my husband's family since 1767. He is the seventh generation on the property. You may be familiar with the property since it was the former Governor James Hoge Tyler's home. But if you haven't heard of it, I'm not surprised. It has been unoccupied full-time for nearly 100 years. However, it always had prize cattle roaming the fields either by the owner or by a lease. When we took over the property, we decided to raise Wagyu. Our family consists of my husband, Tom, and our 3 adult sons. History has never been their favorite subject. They found learning about the American Revolution and the Civil War quite dull. They even once asked me which war happened first. So much for our public school system. That is why I'm trying to pass along the stories of our early family members. Since our ancestors first arrived in America in 1682 on the Caledonia, they have played a role in the formation of this country. Now that our sons know this, they have become more interested in not only the family history, but American history. My husband and our 3 sons are in the process of joining the Sons of the American Revolution. My first book, Sleeping in the Valley, is about the lives of the people buried in the family cemetery called Sunnyside. I was able to research and write the book during the pandemic. Heck, what else was I going to do? We just finished restoring the main house and everything was shutting down for COVID. We restored the cottage first, then the general store and post office. The post office is not seen in this picture. And in 2020, we completed the main house. As we renovated and restored these historic homes, I pondered the lives of the past occupants. But first, let me tell you the story about how we bought the farm and the serendipity events that led us to Southwest Virginia. In 2013, my sister-in-law found the property through a mutual friend. She is a historic preservation attorney and Tom's sister. She picked up our son from Virginia Tech and was given permission by the homeowner, our cousin, to tour the grounds. As you can see, the property was boarded up and not livable. As you can see, the house itself was in disarray. It needed a lot of work. Now, although they only had access to the grounds itself, they were able to find a window that was not boarded up and unlocked. So, they ended up pushing our son through the window to open the door to gain access to the property. Our son asked today, what's the statute of limitations since this happened in 2014? I told him not to worry, we own the property now. We bought the farm. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It's 2015 and we are preparing for our son's graduation from Virginia Tech. He is a 4th generation graduate from Tech. He would have been the 5th generation, but they did not accept my husband. We both ended up at Georgia Tech instead, which is where we met. This is where the research began. I wanted to find out all the graduation years of each generation. It was easy to find out the first 2, but Beverly Lacey was a challenge. The registrar did not have his date since early records were destroyed in a fire. This was my first introduction to special collections at Virginia Tech. After a couple weeks of research, they were able to find his date on a 50th year commencement program since he was a speaker. But I kept digging deeper into the fascinating history of the family, learning about the first families, the heroics of their military duty, and the sad truth about the crumbling property needing to be saved. But life went on, or actually death. My mom wanted to attend our son's graduation, but a couple of weeks before the celebration, she suddenly passed away. But it was the conversation that I had with her the day before that still haunts me. "You have to write the stories down," she said. And the conversation ended with, "If only there was enough time." We bought the farm. Was it the sudden death of my mom and the death of my husband's dad just a couple of months before that spurred us to buy the farm? Or was it graduation day with all the traditions and history that brought us to tears? I would say yes to all three. We were looking for property, and we decided to make this home, after the significant events, ours. After 11 moves all over the country, we have more history here than anywhere. Here is the before and after shot of Belle-Hampton. On the left is our son Peyton in 2013 when they first visited. On the right is a fully restored Belle-Hampton in 2020. It had been a labor of love to bring back this Hoge ancestral home. Besides the restoration planning, I started the family research. My husband's grandfather painted his rendition of the Hoge coat of arms, as seen here. William Hoge came over from Scotland on the Caledonia in 1682 along with his future bride, Barbara Hume. He settled in New Jersey, then Pennsylvania, where Hogestown now is, then made his way to Frederick County, Virginia. His son James, after being born there, stayed and lived in the area. However, his first bride died, and he married again. James, William's son, also had a son named James. For clarification, we refer to him as James Mayo Howe. After his mom died and his father remarried, James Mayo ventured off to find his brother John, who was fighting in the French-Indian War. Instead, he found his true love in the wilderness of southwestern Virginia and married Elizabeth Howe, daughter of Joseph Howe. To give an overview of the people we are talking about, here is the family tree. James Mayo ventured off into the wilderness at the same time as Joseph Howe, coming to Pulaski, who was not Pulaski County at the time, it was Montgomery County. Now we believe the family met in Frederick County, Virginia. Joseph came from Massachusetts with his children in approximately 1758. He was building forts for the French-Indian War. Joseph Howe built a house and called it Sunnyside. It is adjacent to our farm. This is all that remains of the cabin they built. Joseph came from royalty in England. He has some famous relatives like Brigadier General William Howe, who led the British against the Americans in the American Revolution. He also received a sword from George Washington, who thanked him for his service in the French-Indian War. Unfortunately, his descendants melted it down for a silver cup. I'm sure they didn't realize that George Washington gave it to him. Another reason why sharing stories for future generations is so important. So, if you're following along, James had a son, James Mayo, who married Elizabeth Howe, and had a son, James, who became a general. In the meantime, Joseph had a son, Daniel, who had a daughter, Eleanor. It gets a bit confusing when you marry a first cousin. The general and Eleanor had a love story on how they became married. But I talk about that in our book, Sleeping in the Valley. Their portraits hang in the main foyer at Belle-Hampton. General James fought in the War of 1812. We learned about some of the Hoge-Howe family history when we were told about the family cemetery on our neighbor's property. Intrigued, we decided to visit it. Although it was lost in time for many years, a young high school boy found it with GPS. Since we now knew the coordinates, we were able to find it, although as you can see, it was very overgrown. But we had American heroes buried there. 3 American Revolutionary War soldiers, the general from the War of 1812, several Civil War soldiers, including one that died in a prison camp during the war. We wanted to honor the dead. Careful not to damage the stones, we sprayed weed killer. We weed whacked numerous times until we finally could see the stones. Although many stones still need repair and straightening, one of them was toppled over. It was the last gravestone placed in the cemetery. The obelisk was laying face down, and we could not see whose grave marker it was. Our youngest son, Mason, was charged with turning it over. Much to our surprise, the marker was for William Howe. But what you don't know is that our son goes by his middle name. His first name is also William. The strange coincidence, however, was that they share the same birthday, May 26th. Dr. William Hoge's death date is February 3rd, so our son is very cautious anytime that date arrives. But let me tell you a little bit about William. He was a doctor during the Civil War and the Battle of Cloyd's Mountain. Although it hasn't been proven that our house has been a hospital during the war, since William was living there, it was most likely one. After the war, he specialized in diphtheria, a disease affecting so many children at the time. He also performed an appendectomy, which was a highly advanced procedure in the era. Governor Tyler spoke highly of his Uncle William, since he and his wife helped raise the governor after his mother died. Some very prominent graves includes this picture of the General and Eleanor before we cleaned the cemetery. Here's a picture of the General's gravesite. We were able to clean up all around it, and with the help from the DAR, we were able to clean up the stones. Let me tell you a little bit about the General, though. He died in 1861, just as the Civil War started. When I was first researching the family, I assumed that since he was a general, he died in battle. No, the general was already 78 years old and had paralysis in his legs, causing him to be immobile. His wife, Eleanor, died before him, and we now know she died of a heart attack in the arms of Reverend Hickman. On her grave is a broken pillar symbolizing that she was taken too soon. James Mayo, as we mentioned earlier, is also buried there. He is an American Revolutionary War soldier. Let me read an excerpt from my book, Sleeping in the Valley, about James. Peacefully resting on the hill overlooking the fields that he arrived on 45 years before his death, James Mayo Hoge's tomb, distinguished by a slightly crooked, perfectly preserved gravestone, memorializes his passing at the age of 70. The stone embellished with 8-point star symbolizing new beginnings, he lays next to his loving wife Elizabeth. Her stone is adorned with a similar design and has all but fallen over from the years withstanding the elements. Nearby, Charlotte, the granddaughter, has a mere fragment of a memorial withered to the point of almost indefinable plaque representing her short life. The stories of their lives were passed down for 7 generations, along with the hope to remember them for 7 more. We identified this stone as Major Daniel Howe. Daniel was the father of Eleanor Howe and served in the American Revolution. He was to capture the British sympathizers, the Tories. But while doing his job, he found his true love, a young Nancy Haven, the youngest daughter of Howard Haven, a known Tory. After the Revolution, he married and eventually took over the Howe family homestead, Sunnyside. The entire story of their romance is documented in my book, Sleeping in the Valley. Samuel Howe died in the Civil War. He was captured at the Battle of Gettysburg and taken as a prisoner to Point Lookout, Maryland, where he died. His ashes were brought back to Sunnyside, where the servants thought he haunted the house. Although many children are in the family cemetery, Nellie's marker is the most prominent. Nellie was the daughter of Governor Tyler. In his diary, the governor documents his heartbreak over the loss, but he prays to God and says, "Thy will be done." She was only 1 year old. We believe he was so distraught over losing his daughter that he moved out of Belle-Hampton and built a house in Radford, Hollywood. It's now the president of the university's residence. John was the brother of General James Howe. His stone was completely underground when we discovered it. He owned a house on Neck Creek Road just down the road from Belle-Hampton. Although the general bought out his 10 siblings to own Belle-Hampton after his father died, John too was a successful businessman in his own right. We think there must have been a bit of a sibling rivalry going on with how much land each owned. His third wife, Elizabeth Rippey, is buried by his side. As you can see, the cemetery is in an open field. We have since fenced it off to prevent cattle from accessing it. We also try to maintain the cemetery as best we can with yearly cleanups. We also put flags on the soldier's grave every 4th of July. Honoring the lives of the people buried in the Howe Cemetery is only one reason I have written the book, Sleeping in the Valley. I am encouraging the rising generation to learn their history so they can learn the lessons of our ancestors. That way, they can plan their futures. We have 3 books available: Sleeping in the Valley, which are the stories of those buried in the family cemetery. We also have the diary, which is the Governor's Tyler's diary, and Thoughts on This and That, which is a journal with inspirational quotes and pictures. If you'd like more information, you can go to our website, Belle-Hampton.com. It is full of resources about history and how you can share your own stories with the rising generation. Follow us with our newsletter that comes out monthly. Help us make history matter.